Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury.
Electrifying.
Yes, guys, and welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. Hope you are all doing well. Hope you are all good on this fine Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever day it is where you are at whilst tuning in to this latest episode of the main podcast. A big one. You know, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got no Alex. He is away. He's in Paris. Hopefully he's having a smashing time. I've seen the Instagram stuff, so it looks like he's really enjoying that. So yeah, hopefully it's a nice break for him. But I have the man, the myth, the legend, the great, the elite, the tactico wizard. That is George. I like to call him Warge though. W with a W for just standard dubs all the time. How are you, George?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Mixed feelings from the weekend. It's kind of like, you know, we'll get into it, obviously. Just the general feeling of like, you know, before Saturday, I was thinking about that lead and what it could have been. And it's still nice, but obviously what's transpired, that's why there's a lot to talk about. So we'll definitely get stuck into that. But just general housekeeping stuff to start off with. Our producer, our main man, MJ, has requested, as per, for you guys to hit that notification button. So if you want all of these videos to get the latest up-to-date notification for all of the videos, whether it's Scouted, main podcast, TCP Live, every bit of content that we do, if you hit that notification button, you'll be able to get that immediately. So please do press that for me, if you could do. And also for me, Spotify. Now, I addressed this on TCP Live. You can actually like the channel and give it a rating, and I've seen 275 votes for us. I want that to be 300. Come Wednesday, I want it to be 300. Just give us a rating on Spotify if you could do. That would be very appreciated. So, housekeeping stuff done. I think the best place to start, George, is the title race. And we had, you know, the big game.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I don't mean to steal your thunder as a host. We have skipped the word of the day, and
God,
I cannot do that because just to give some background, and you know what? I won't keep this rant very long, but it does happen to us. And the word of the day for this podcast is going to be appropriation. The action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. And there has been an appropriation of my sweet dear Rohan on Twitter from an account. And I don't mean to pile on, but I did want to touch on it because I think what we do here is genuine. We try to, as creators, provide something new for you. And I think it has less to do with this idea of, you know, wanting to be validated for your opinion. It has a lot more to do with the genuine thought that a lot of us try to do, and Rohan's not on his own, but even with ourselves at the Cannon Podcast, we try to provide you with content you can't find elsewhere. And so when you do appropriate someone's content, and I've had it plenty on Twitter, and I find myself, you know, I get into my arguments, and, you know, everyone knows me and my Twitter arguments, and sometimes it can be a futile task. But you know what? It doesn't feel nice when you spend what is legitimately hours of your time trying to provide new stuff for somebody. And, you know, mate, like when you make that kind of an article, that wasn't just you spur of the moment, I'm going to finish this in 10 minutes. You put thought and effort into that. And to have somebody flat out copy and paste your work. And, you know, I've had it myself where I find people taking my thoughts and my words and copy and pasting my thoughts on the game and then almost bastardizing it. And I'm going to go that strong. And for yourself, like, I know it's difficult for you to talk about because it happened to you, but I'm going to talk to you because it's ridiculous and we need to stop it and we need to call it out. And it's more of a case of, I think we all have something to offer. And, you know, I think football discourse can do a little bit of a better job of constantly needing the validation. And I think that insecurity is where it comes to, because otherwise I just can't understand why you would spend legitimately 45 minutes trying to copy and paste what's nearly 3,000 words. But I don't want to take you away from this convo because I know it happened to you and you might be embarrassed to talk about it. But I, for one, wanted to say outright, it's ridiculous. Let's stop doing that. And, you know, when you have an idea or you have thoughts on idea, that's no problem. But to take somebody else's thought and make it your own, to appropriate, somebody's
Love that.
integrity is not right.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Like it's like the third or fourth time it's happened, and I look at it and I always like chuckle and laugh about things. I don't really take stuff seriously, but then when I deep it, I see it. For me, it's like I see it happen to a lot of other people like yourself. I see it to other really good content creators as well, and I just think it's not right. And that's why I wanted to post about it on X, not just because of in terms of how it happened to me, because ultimately I don't deep it, but it's not right. And I think when something's not right, you should certainly call it out. And yeah, no, it was, I just don't understand it. I think it's very good practice in general. Like, you should always reference somebody's work. If you want to post like a video clip, I know there's an account, Chemo, AFC, who does really good stuff. He does like analytical videos where he's got actual in-game clips, and you can see certain things happening, and that sort of stuff you should always be crediting. You shouldn't be just taking it and without crediting the original content creator. So yeah, no, I appreciate you asking, George, and I'm totally all good. Like I always find it amusing, but when we are being serious, a lot of people will look at it differently and they'll be hurt by that sort of stuff happening to them. So yeah, it's just good practice to not plagiarize. Like if you're in uni, if you're doing like coursework in general, and you're found out to be plagiarizing, there's like serious repercussions. Genuinely, like you can literally, that whole entire module could become a 0 mark, like from you doing something like that. It's quite serious.
There is no walk of life in which you can so blatantly appropriate somebody, and it leads to ultimately you having not contributed something to the community, B, you being something that you're not, and then lastly, you attempting to gain from somebody else's hard work. And that's just where I draw the line ultimately. And so that's honestly where I think I have to say about it. I just think that we need to do a better job as a community to call that out. Because I think everybody doesn't want to say it's not that deep, and it doesn't hurt, but it does, and deep down it does, and you're annoyed. And I don't mean to say that you're gonna carry it for the next couple days, that he's gonna curse the name, etc., etc. But in the moment, you're sitting there and you're thinking, hold on, I thought long and hard about trying to add something to the community that wanted some insight, that wanted some discussion. And by the way, let's just call it what it is. We do this content for you, the audience. If I didn't want to contribute to the Arsenal space, I certainly wouldn't be having a YouTube channel. I certainly wouldn't want to be writing on X. Like, I want other people to discuss my opinion. And, I think that's important. Discourse is important. But yeah, don't impersonate to try to be somebody else. Just be yourself. There's no other validation you need than yourself. And being yourself is all that we need. And we love you, the content people, and we love you, Rohan, just as much as the next person. So
we love you, George, because you are always yourself, and you are going to give me your thoughts on the title race and Man City.
Look at this transition game. It's serious.
Yeah. So that was obviously the big clash on Sunday, Man City, Liverpool. And before getting into the Arsenal stuff, I think we do like to start these main podcasts a lot about just the general title race, because it's very important to us, of course. So yeah, what were your thoughts on the game? Did you expect the result to be what it was, with Man City in an emphatic fashion, dismantling Liverpool, and I think puts them in a serious spot of bother where people are starting to eliminate them from the race, which is crazy.
Yeah, I don't agree with the elimination aspect, but one thing that I really push back on was the City quality point, because I know I felt like at times I was. Yeah,
you have always said that City were like, they're gonna start clicking into gear a bit more, and people are underrating them. You did say that. Yeah,
the quality I felt like was being underplayed, and primarily was because, of course, look, I don't want to dissuade from the Haaland outlier effect. Like, when you look at the total percentage of team goals, I think he's got something like 14, whereas the next supporting cast has like 2 from City. So I mean, there is definitely an individual quality aspect, but with City, there was a group of underlying second options that I felt had quality that people were underrating. And I mean, it's not just Doku, if he can be fit, which is a big if. You've got Marmoush, who has an ability to impact games with some serious output. And I think that Manchester City are a sleeping giant in this title race, and I've said it since the beginning of the season, because there seemed to be this acceptance that they were washed, quote unquote. Or you do always tend to like tear down your favorites. We always do this, you know. But yes, I think it showed its domination. It showed, I think, more of Liverpool's problems and highlighted their problems more than anything. And we did talk about this at the beginning of the season, that every team is flawed. And I think that every team is going to go through their moments in which their flaws are highlighted, because we don't have a perfect team. And that's what makes the title race so exciting. But I do feel that City's flaws are able to be mitigated a little bit more by the depth of their squad bench. Whereas I think that the squad depth Liverpool acquired upset the balance of what made them good. Whereas the depth that City have added to their team supplements things that they don't have, but don't change their identity. And that, for me, is the biggest point and what I took away from the 3-0, because you look at the midfield, you look at the spacing, and you look at what has made Liverpool brilliant last season. And the biggest thing I took away is Mohamed Salah and his impact. If you look at Mohamed Salah in that game and compare it to previous matches against City, the threat that he was able to carry was completely different last season as opposed to this season. The defending that Virgil van Dijk has been able to show in his own box this season is completely different. And the situations that Liverpool expose themselves to, the transitions they expose themselves to, are completely different to last season, because they've upset the balance of their team. And I think that Pep in this game didn't do anything particularly different as to what he was showing all season, but it was kind of the easiest way to hurt Liverpool, especially in isolated 1v1s. And I do think that the Haaland-Doku axis is something that is a very potent axis. And ironically, they're probably one of the more injury-prone duos, not just in the league, but for City in general. So that's going to be the question mark. However, I do think that game did show us the difference in terms of the impetus and the momentum. I don't think Liverpool are out, but the amount of games that they've dropped points in so far this season leaves them with an outside chance, very similar to how we felt in moments last year and how we let the title race slip. So can Liverpool in their next 5 regain the momentum they lost? That's a question mark. But I do think City have an opportunity to kind of reinforce that they aren't as washed or as guaranteed of third place as some people do. And the only thing I'll end on is it's really ironic that the teams that people felt like were guaranteed third place have snuck up 2 years running. Liverpool did this last year. City are doing it right now. So I don't know what your thoughts were on City, their quality, and kind of the difference between the two.
No, I think the comparison to Liverpool is really good. In like just in general, looking at it and thinking, there was the feeling from last season, if City weren't going to be at it, and if Arsenal finish above City, we'll win the league. But then there comes Liverpool, in which they go on tremendous form, and I do think that I'm not going to try and downplay their title, because they won it for a reason. They deserve to win it. But I do think that the injuries that we endured, the injuries that City endured as well last season, that was a campaign in which, both those two clubs felt the worst of it, and Liverpool had the best of it. And fair play to them. Like I said, they were able to keep that continuity within their team week in, week out, with a couple of changes here and there. They had a couple of injuries, but in terms of their spine and in terms of like key players being absent for prolonged periods of time, that didn't happen. And you do need that to win a Premier League title, and Liverpool managed to maximise that in the previous campaign. And now it's kind of like, we spoke a lot about Liverpool and the changes that they've had to endure. I don't sit here and, if we're not being tribal, I don't think Florian Wirtz is a bomb. I don't think, Ekitike is a bomb. I don't think Isak is a bomb, despite, the tribal nature of it, was trying to, point score on rivals, etc. These are really good players, but I think there's a lot of change that they've had to endure. And I think that's really hurting them. And also with the absence of Trent Alexander-Arnold, the supply line, to Mohamed Salah. It's a completely different way in terms of how he's accessing the final third and what types of passes and what types of balls he's getting himself onto. But Man City, I think I have downplayed them a little bit. I've always felt that they're a threat, but I didn't think that they would be as good as what I saw over the past couple of games. Now, I've not been able to catch every single Man City game because, our games and Man City's games have clashed over the past few weeks. Like when we've played, they've played, both in the Champions League and in the Premier League. So I didn't catch the Aston Villa game. I'd be very intrigued to look at that game and see, what happened there, because apparently, Aston Villa deserved to win that game. And that's pretty recent still, despite some of the performances that they've been able to give since then, Bournemouth being one of them. But I don't know if you've seen John McKenzie's analysis on Man City, George, but he's done a segment on City and the changes that they've made this season. And I did see it against Liverpool, in which, there's so much emphasis on, being compact centrally and the spaces out wide, and you have to attack the wide spaces in order to really dismantle teams. Pep has put a lot of focus on continuing to play through the middle, and he's doing it with the way the wingers are coming inside with Doku, and you're seeing the freedom that Doku is getting in those central spaces. Foden stepping outside of the block, coming really deep to show for the ball, and then the fullbacks going high to create these overloads on the opposition fullbacks. And Guardiola said yesterday, and we've tried this against Liverpool as well, in terms of how he explicitly stated that Liverpool with Mohamed Salah is a freak. He has been a freak since he's came to the Premier League, and he is someone which they want to keep high. And with that, you're banking on his productivity, you're banking on his output, but unfortunately, the defensive side of the game, when you're not with the ball, that is a clear weakness. And Pep said the space was there on Liverpool's right-hand side and their left-hand side, and they exploited it to full effect. They did similar things against Bournemouth as well, in terms of the principles of the wingers coming inside and the fullbacks in O'Reilly and Nunes, then starting deep but then joining high to create these dilemmas. Because what was happening is against Bournemouth, and I don't want to do too much on the tactical side of this, but the wingers, when they were coming inside, it gave the opposition fullbacks a dilemma, because when they tucked in to cover the wingers, that meant the space was then out wide for the fullbacks to then attack that width, because Bournemouth's wide forwards, the wingers, were pressing higher, so that space was there available. The moment that they recognised that the space out wide was causing them problems, they then stayed wider. And what that meant is the players in the middle, in Doku and Foden and Cherki, were able to get a lot of time on the ball, with Haaland pinning the centre-backs because of the threat that Haaland provides. So they've had some really good solutions. They've looked good. So certainly one to keep an eye on. But I think this discussion is really important. Like, do we believe that Man City are going to now go on a run, George? Because I'm looking at the games immediately after the international break. Now, Newcastle are in a really bad moment. Like, the fans are not happy, to say the least. I heard that the Brentford game was awful. But St. James's Park is a cauldron in the big games. It don't matter what form they're in. The moment you've got Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, then the players at the back, and how they do play in those games, it's going to be a battle. So I think that's going to be an interesting test for City. But what do you think about City in terms of going on a run and putting on the pressure? Because I do think that there's apprehension amongst the Arsenal fan base from what I have seen, especially after what transpired from our game, which we'll certainly get into. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Classic newbie podcast role. But I was going to say that's because we are a hyperbolic bunch as Arsenal fans, and we go from being best in the world to worst in the world to it's happening again and back and forth again. The one thing that I do think, though, that you're highlighting, when you mentioned Tonali, Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, that's a physical midfield. Yeah. What are Liverpool? They are not a physical midfield.
Which is crazy, isn't it? Because that's not what you associate Liverpool with.
No,
right?
But that's the point, that why they've fallen, what I believe them to not be a very significant title challenger, and what they haven't respected. They haven't respected their roots in that aspect. But City, when you have questions, by the way, mate, I think you have questions because it's not even just Newcastle. Don't they have Fulham coming up in their next 5 fixtures in addition to Newcastle?
Got lots of Fulham, yeah.
And what is that? The physical mid-block. What have Arsenal just gone through? They've just proven the physical mid-block. And so from an Arsenal fan perspective, I'm very happy with this collection of results. We'll talk about the Sunderland result right after, which was definitely a disappointment in the way that and the context that we lost points in. However, we did get through that physical mid-block test, and I'm going to maintain the winner of the Premier League is those that are going to be consistent against the physical mid-block. For me, that has been the kind of crux, the kryptonite, if you will, to title winners in the last 2 years. people that have been able to successfully collect points against them will, more often than not, win the title in May. Because everybody goes through a period in which you're going to have 5 games on the trot when you're a title challenger that you're winning. So I expect City, I don't know if it's going to be now, and I don't think it will be, but I do expect, mate, by February, March, they're going to do a 5-6 game run in a row in which they do collect points. I think that we will see that. But again, when you collect the kind of physical mid-block game, the Fulham, the Palace, the West Ham, the Nottingham Forest, you collect some of those results and you start to say, how well did you do against those teams? I think the person that is the most consistent in those output will do it. I do want to really quickly highlight Nico Gonzalez and Nico O'Reilly as I think really critical pieces to what you're seeing. Because you're right, John McKenzie had mentioned that idea of the wingers coming inside, but what gives them the platform to do that and have the fullbacks outside? It's having a presence to find the ball centrally, which is Nico Gonzalez, who's done a brilliant job about being a kind of all-rounder tempo setter for them. And then I think Nico O'Reilly has done brilliant job about giving the lockdown defending down the left that gives Doku the freedom to come inside and wreak havoc and not have as much defensive work.
Just to quickly to add on that, George, did you always foresee this with Nico Gonzalez? Because what I've seen this season, this guy looks seriously good. I mean, I didn't see it before. I didn't know what he was like at Porto. I think it was Porto, wasn't it, that he came from? He looks good. He looks really good.
I think he was one of those that needed time, but I thought did the basics well. And that's all that City needed. They didn't have a consistent person. They actually haven't had one for years. Whether you want to talk about Calvin Phillips, whether you talk about finding a backup to Rodri has been something that they've spent hundreds of millions of pounds on and failed to do in years. And I think that Nico Gonzalez does a really good job about giving them tempo, but also a dual winning edge. Like the combination for me of Nico Gonzalez and Nico O'Reilly makes the center less penetrable. Whereas City of the past have been vulnerable through the middle because without Rodri, they haven't had a presence to stop transitions themselves. And I think those two have given them a solidity base that allows them to commit central numbers without being outnumbered because their dual numbers have been excellent. So that's kind of my conclusion of it. And I don't think that Connor Bradley on Liverpool's side has done a good enough job of doing it. I don't think that the midfield with Szoboszlai and even Gravenberch have done a good enough job of winning the central duel. And by the way, the Declan Rice and Zubimendi pivot, which we used very well in our Sunderland match to different effects, is exactly why I feel our solidity leads us as the top contender in the game. And I think that's where I'll transition.
You are so happy with that. But just to add into that, right, and it's a really good transition. I just wanted to say, Nico Gonzalez and Nico O'Reilly, and this is an Arsenal podcast, but I do think that it's important to, give credit where it's due to certain players. I think those two have been ridiculous this season. I think Nico O'Reilly, from a performance perspective, he's probably been the best left back this season, and that's
perfect Arteta fullback.
Perfect Arteta fullback. We've got a lot of them though, so we certainly don't need another one. And Calafiori, I think, has had a very good season. I just think Nico O'Reilly, performance-wise, every single time I've seen him, and from what I've heard of other people that I trust, He's been fantastic in pretty much every game. I mean, he was good against us as well. It's quite crazy because the game against City, I thought Madueke had a good game, but equally I thought Nico O'Reilly did pretty well against him. So it's one of those ones where both players deserve their credit. But just, to transition to the Sunderland game.
That central pivot, by the way, how solid it can be. And I think that's the story personally for Sunderland where, look, mate, it's gutting. This is football, by the way. Yeah. As far as the result goes, I have so many thoughts. I don't think that we were great in the first half. And I know that we'll go into details about why and what we struggled with. But the transition from the first half to the second half and our ability to come back and do that kind of quality. I think I'm sat here on the podcast, not doing 20 minutes about City and doing an hour about how Arsenal's open chance creation was so phenomenal in the second half. And I'm sat here, and by the way, I'm going to highlight it. Just because we lost doesn't mean it didn't happen. However, it felt like someone punched me in the kidney is all I can say. Because whilst we weren't at the races in the first half and we didn't deserve the territory, I don't think Sunderland were out of this world in terms of their ability to maybe be worth the 1-0. I don't think they were worth the 1-0. I think it was just an evenly contested game with the ball not in play. And it was just kind of like where we didn't do our fundamentals right. And maybe that's a credit to Sunderland, but I don't think Sunderland outplayed us and outplayed us off the park in order to deserve that 1-0. We'll talk about the goal, and we'll talk about the foul and how we couldn't gain tempo, because I think there was a big change in the second half to how we approached our duels and the second ball game. But yeah, mate, like after that, we'll talk about the ways in which we thrived in the second half, but I just felt gutted, and I just felt like this is football.
Yeah.
Like this really is football. And, there was no consistent pattern that I'm like, I'm really afraid of this repeating itself. There's a lot of stuff that we probably need to talk about from an Arsenal perspective, because there were some really brilliant things that we've shown that we didn't all season. And arguably that was our best creative performance of the season in the second half. But then we actually fell by our biggest strength, box defending, which, we'll debate about the decision about whether or not to add players to prevent crosses versus defending the box. But one thing you cannot say is that Arsenal do not defend their box brilliantly, that Arsenal are not a team in a low block situation, that haven't frustrated every single person in this league, and that it isn't a major strength. Have we faltered in a major moment? Yes, but that doesn't describe us as a team in general. So it's just frustrating to lose that way when you lose against with your bread and butter, but you do the things that you haven't shown all season and you're not able to brag about it. I think that's also why I saw a lot of players, by the way, commenting on the draw, because I think it hurt them to show something they know they haven't done well enough all season, but not have the 3 points to show for it and to brag about with it. But yeah, I'm just gutted, mate. I'm just gutted. I don't know how you felt, but
I totally hear that. And, it feels like a loss, but at least it was a point, right? To look at it from purely a scoreline perspective. Now, yeah, I mean, I was gutted. I was gutted when I saw that, because I was thinking, so I think firstly, so the first half was pretty poor, right? I don't think anybody would, object to that. I do think, with Sunderland, that I've only watched one Sunderland game before, and it was the Everton game at Monday night. The week before, and I only watched around about 40 odd minutes of it. It's just bored to death of it. But so I came into this game and I didn't really know what to expect from Sunderland. I looked at their possession numbers and I saw, okay, this is a team that doesn't have a lot of the ball. It's about 40% possession, which places them near the bottom end of the table in that metric. And just generally, I saw a lot of the analysis about Sunderland, and it didn't feel like it was going to be an aggressive and physical game. But maybe that was naive of me, because when I look at the team and you look at the players that they have, Dan Ballard, Mukiele, that central midfielder alongside Xhaka as well. Siddiqui, he looks like he's got about...
Tesco Conte.
About 10 lungs, running up and down non-stop. So, and then obviously with Isidore as well, Bertrand Traore, these are physical players. And I do think, right, so... We'll talk about Arsenal, but sometimes we do have to give credit to the opposition, right? Sunderland, they weren't out of this world, as you allude to, but what they did is they unsettled Arsenal in that first half, and they physically matched us. And for me, like, what the first half is, and the way I explained it was, and you kind of touched on it, is the loose ball game for me. The loose ball game is something that happens a lot in the Premier League. Now, I think in general, when we go to St. James's Park, and Arsenal have been criticised in the past of going there to wrestle and it becomes a WWE fight. It's like, you have to. You have to be able to match them there, because they provoke that sort of game. And that's exactly the game that Sunderland provoked as well. And do you know what? Credit to them. That's how they wanted to play. That was their intention. And it worked for the first half, in which Sunderland, what they do, so the loose ball game, imagine you have Team A and Team B, right? And I speak about this on my Substack, on the piece that I did, right? So Team A, let's say they're on the ball and they're at goal kicks, but Team B is now pressing you man to man, 1v1 spread across the entire pitch. That provokes you to go long, because it becomes very difficult to consistently play through the lines on the ground in that sort of environment. So you go long, and that immediately means there's at least one physical exchange, which is the first ball. So Raya hits that ball, and let's say Arsenal Team A, Sunderland Team B. Raya hits that ball over the top because he's provoked to do that. So somebody's going to compete for that duel. It's going to be a Sunderland player, and it's going to be an Arsenal player. And that will then lead to another physical exchange, which is the second ball. But then there might be a third ball, there might be a fourth ball, there might be a fifth ball. It becomes really scrappy. So whoever latches onto that ball is then able to set the next attack. If it's Sunderland, what Sunderland were doing is when they had the ball, they were trying to get it long immediately after that. So then it leads to another exchange. And it's just constant ripple effect of exchanges happening in which if you don't win the loose ball game situation enough, that will mean that you can't control the game. And that's why the ball was in play for 20 odd minutes, because this sort of game, it provokes fouls, it's pinball, fouls, injuries, really direct throw-ins as well from both teams, and it just becomes a really nasty game. The only way in which you're able to play your football, and we'll certainly talk about it, is if you win the loose ball game many times, because when you do that, and especially when you win the ball near the middle third, because Sunderland pressed man-to-man when we were at goal kicks. So if Arsenal won a situation in which this loose ball game is happening and they go back, Sunderland are going to press on again and they're going to go man-to-man, and they're very aggressive in that way. Dan Ballard was following Eze all the way in when Eze was dropping deep. But if you win the ball in the middle third, it becomes a lot harder to press man-to-man because you are closer to your own goal. So from Sunderland's perspective, it becomes a lot more dangerous to do that. Whereas the higher you are, it gives you more opportunities to press. So in the second half, and we'll talk about it, and I think you want to allude to how we were a lot better in that regard. But we were able to win the loose ball game a lot more in the middle third, and that meant that we could pin Sunderland deep in their 5-4-1 block. That was a nominal shape, and then that's where you start to see us create the chances. So my whole point about this is Sunderland in the first half made it very difficult for us, and we should credit them. In the second half, what happened is Arsenal won a lot more of those situations, and that meant that we could create the chances because we could then play our football. That's where I stand on it. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there are two things to address with the second ball game, and I'll tell you why, from my perspective, we weren't able to control that as much. And when you throw a ball into a washing machine, it's going up, down, and all that. That's what happened in the first half, and it comes from two different things, right? Typically, when we're against Newcastle, we face this type of game, right? Yep. What do you need, by the way? And you need your center forward to be able to bring the ball down.
Yeah.
And you need him to be able to hold off challenges and bring others into play. That's the first thing. I don't think that Mikel Merino did that well enough. I think in the first half when he was coming deep, there was a lot of really loose touches and he wasn't able to really get a reference point. So the team, when going long to kind of get out of the loose ball game, we didn't have enough people able to retain high and bring others into play. So immediately that meant the ball was coming right back at us from the top. And then from the bottom of the team, I do think that we saw a very different use of the pivot. From the first half to the second half, and Zubamendi's position really changed as far as who was primarily deep and who was primarily high. And Declan Rice moved to be primarily deep, and the knock-on effect of that is that all those second balls that are happening in the middle third are now being competed by Declan Rice more than Zubamendi. And Zubamendi's going to be receiving in the half spaces a little bit higher, which, by the way, adds a player for Eze to combine off of, which wasn't the case in the first half. So it was a combination of really Mikel Merino not being able to offer that reference or that body for Eze to work off of. Equally, Eze was lost in possession, but ironically out of possession, that was his best game that I've seen from Arsenal perspective. Like, he was really good in terms of his intensity off the ball. I think that together, Mikel Merino and Eze didn't offer enough of a threat. And there was a little bit of a change again in the pressing structure, because I felt as though that Declan Rice and Zubamendi being a little bit high, you have another ball receiver between the lines that can help advance play. And Zubamendi started picking up positions kind of even in the box in which he's shifting and turning. There's a lot of really intelligent play that I had really told people, look at Zubamendi through the lens of a Gundogan and have that idea with him, because we will play him higher up like we did with Jorginho against Liverpool that one time as an 8. And that iteration, that flexibility to shift the priority of the pivot from having Zubamendi primarily deep and having Rice deep with Zubamendi high, I think gave us the impetus to add Eze a partner, who he started really flourishing, by the way, in the second half as well. I think Saka also had a lot more freedom. There was a lot more willingness. And the one big difference from the first half also is that I felt as though that we were making a lot quicker decisions. The play was quicker, and the ability to play people in with a lot more decisive intent was clear. We had a little bit of a horseshoe map when we did get possession of the ball in the first half. We didn't do too much with it. So I do think that we have this ability, by the way, to shift importance in the pivot. And it's not as though you need one person constantly back and one person constantly forward, but it asks you tend to say this a lot, Rohan, when you say that different tools offer different questions. And, that just because they're playing together and the priority of who stays deeper more often than not, I think Zubimendi works 80% of the time. But when you have a physical match, and by the way, every single time we've come back from losing positions, Sunderland, Newcastle, you're looking at this exact game state, and Rice thrives in that. So for me, getting him in those positions has to be something that we prioritize, because there's no one better in world football at demanding and dominating.
And he's better than Rice in that regard as well, isn't he, in the pockets? He's just a lot smoother. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I think...
So, that midfield change, I guess, for me, was one of the big things that sparked it, in addition to just winning our duels. I think there was an aspect to that in which we all collectively started dominating our duels a bit more. But I think that midfield change allowed us to. Like, the leader of those dominating duels is Rice. And... I think another player that I wanted to highlight was Calafiori, and his ability to offer space with some dismarking runs that meant Trossard had the Doku ability to drift inside and have a little bit more separation and space, because Calafiori was doing, even though he really angered me with some of the fouls towards the last end of the second half, he was making some brilliant runs that almost offered, that Lucas Paqueta ability to kind of on the overlap and really not necessarily dominate possession, but his movement and his runs create a dynamism. And I know we were talking about it in a group chat, so I'll end on this idea of static pinning versus dynamic overloads. So really simply, I don't want to get too complicated, but when you do have a low block, okay, and that's what Sunderland kind of moved towards in the second half, we forced them back, okay. A lot of people, I think, were bemoaning the lack of a stretcher in Madueke, in Gyökeres, in our front line, lacking the ability to stretch Sunderland back. But to me, I was sitting there thinking, guys, we're going to force them into a low block, even if we had someone to stretch, which I think would have been better in the last 10 minutes when they were coming back onto us. That I understand. But in terms of getting the goal back, you have a team that's in their box. You don't need stretch. There's no space to stretch. They're all in their box and they're defending. What you do need is you need to be able to draw out their defensive line. Either commit them forward or commit them wide and create that doubt. And you create that doubt not by just having people stand in position, which is the technical term for static pinning, let's call it. Someone just matching up with the defensive line. It's not just about standing there or standing to the right of somebody. You need to make sure that you're arriving in spaces that force the defender to travel with you. If you don't ask them to do that, then it becomes a very easy game to defend. And that's why, for me, in the first half, it looked like Sunderland had the play in front of them. It was that entire concept of static pinning, which we did do. We had people in the final third, but they weren't dragging defenders around. And we created more space by pulling defenders wide, which allowed us to arrive in spaces that we started to exploit. See the crossbar from Zubimendi before. See the Eze chance that we had on the cut back. And, it started to create spaces. But I don't want to move you out of the conversation about the second half change.
No, that's really good analysis, and I think for me, I follow a lot of that, and like the Zubimendi point is really interesting, because I don't know if you saw, like, there was a tweet in the summer, an AI tweet. So AI was asked, I don't know which one it was actually, which chat box it was, but it was asked. Someone asked, like, what is the best version of Busquets in today's day? It was Zubimendi and Declan Rice together as a duo. That is the modern day Busquets. That is the modern day Busquets. I was like, this was before I'd even watched more Zubimendi. Oh, okay, that's a bit tasty. But I do think Zubimendi and Rice. I really want to push on the positives on this game a lot, and I think there's going to be some interesting chat that we can have in the questions in terms of, like, low block, was it the right decision Mikel made, etc. We'll touch on that in the questions. There's some really good ones in the Discord that I've had a look at. But in terms of the changes in the second half, so we've gathered that we've become a lot better in the duels, and Calafiori mentioned post match on the Arsenal website, and he was asked what did Mikel change at half time, and Mikel, in his post-match said,
when I lose a duel, I am upset.
exactly that. He did say in his post-match that they tweaked a few things that are a little bit more nuanced that he's not going to reveal. That I do believe what you've spoken about and what I've wrote about is what happened, because I saw that change in the second half. But ultimately, Calafiori said the main one was you've got to win your duels, because if you don't win your duels, you can't play. You can't play games. You can't play the game. You can't pin them deep. So I think this idea in which Sunderland in the second half, they retreated a lot. No, they retreated because we were winning the duels. That is the only way in which we were able to pin them back. And then once we did, I think Zubamendi in those spaces is ridiculous. The way he turns, whether it's in the right half space, whether it's in the left half space, he's fantastic. And the point about pinning, now, I think this is really important. So when we're in the final third, we have some of our staples, right? So the Bukayo Saka, cut inside, cross towards the back post, which very nearly won us the game. In the dying embers, like you said, with the Calafiori header, and then Mika Marino, his shot being denied by Dan Ballard off the line. And also, there was the Zubamendi shot. Crossbar came from that Saka chance creation. And that comes with pinning. Players in the box, pinning the last line. At the back, there's an overload. There's always an overload. The wing-back is sandwiched between two players. And with that cross, because it's coming towards the goalkeeper, it naturally drags the back line and the midfielders closer towards the goalkeeper. So the space is going to be in the top of the box. And we've had Eze, we've had Zubamendi in those situations. And Eze and Zubamendi have had a few shots in that range. And it's really unlucky from Zubamendi. But the pinning point is really important, because I think sometimes one of my criticisms, and I don't have loads of us in terms of how we play, but I have felt at times we have had over-excessive pinning, in which, you look at it on paper and you think, oh, there's like 5 players attacking the cross and they're on the last line. I don't think that's always a good thing, because if you've got players who are already there, they're not arriving dynamically. So the Sunderland players, they're big guys. Dan Ballard's a big guy. They're in their eye line. They know where they are. So they back themselves to be able to deal with it. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to stop every situation, as we've seen with Bukayo Saka's unstoppable ability in that regard. But I think you need to mix up a bit more. And what I've felt is in the second half, how you talk about the horseshoe? Everyone talks about the horseshoe effect of Arsenal. The horseshoe effect is when you have so many players standing on the last line, on the back line there, because you can't pass to them immediately because they're already being marked. So then you have to go around the block and then try and find other solutions. What we were having in the second half is we still had pinning. As you mentioned with the Calafiori dismarking, pinning the wide centre-back in a back five is very important, because that's where you can then start to attack the space in behind between the central centre-back and the wide centre-back, or even the wide centre-back and the wing-back. So what was happening is Calafiori, and there's a really good, like I said, it's don't want to butcher his app, but it's at Kimo FC, and you can have a look at some of these clips back
of the second half.
The comp of the second half. It's really good, right? So you can see this happening. A lot of moves. So Calafiori, and I don't want to go too much on this because you spoke about it brilliantly. Calafiori is pinning Mukiele, but he's moving into really good spaces. He's dragging him wide. He's jumping. He's forcing him to jump forward and closer towards us. And then that allows someone, at times it was Timber, at times it was Saka, at times it was Zubamendi. They're starting deep, but then they're attacking. They're making the run dynamically, as opposed to standing in between Dan Ballard and Mukiele, and they're arriving in space. And then Trossard is fantastic at those cute little passes inside. He just finds that corridor, and he was playing it time and time again, and we were causing serious problems to Sunderland. I've not seen Arsenal do that a lot in the past. And that, for me, was really encouraging to see. And we created a lot of big moments from that. Now, I do apologise that we don't have the tactics board here to be able to fully explain this. But hopefully you kind of get a gist of what we're saying, which, you got players on the last line in the first half. They're static. We're on paper, we're looking really attacking. We're trying to threaten them. But because they're staying high, loads of attackers staying high, it meant that we had to keep moving the ball around, or we were constrained with just crossing the ball. Second half, we can start to play these passes through the block, and it was a lot better. But any closing thoughts on that before we look at maybe
one really quick one, and that's going to be my plug, because that's exactly the topic I'm going to address in the tactical corner. This idea of static pinning and dynamic overloads. So
when is that going to be released, George? Tell the good people.
That will be. You should look for that on Friday as a little sneak peek, because that will be released then. But we will actually give a visual example of it so that everyone can visualize. But I just want to end on this piece of play. Why does Bukayo Saka run inside to receive a throw-in? as opposed to just staying high.
Yeah.
It's that exact point about arriving with momentum to carry your action. And the reason that we do that is because you don't give time for your defender to set up. When you do and play is in front of you, that becomes very easy for it, or rather it's comfortable for a defender. Those are some of the things that you need to do, because when play is in front of you, you can react. And so by Bukayo Saka peeling a little bit more inside and receiving the throw in on the run, that whole principle is because he wants to dynamically run into space and receive dynamically on the run, as opposed to just receiving with somebody up his paws and like just statically pinning somebody deep. And that's what we do in order to create space, even off a throw-in. So these principles can apply anywhere on the pitch. It's just this idea that we want to create space for the receiver. All in all, I did want to maybe just end really quickly before maybe we go into questions and stuff with a quick question from yourself, actually. Okay, you're looking at Arsenal in terms of their ability to come back, and that's something that we're highlighting. We've highlighted why.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a change in terms of our pattern of play, maybe since Newcastle? And in terms of our ability to kind of work back losing or drawn game states? Have you seen enough of a sample size this season to say, okay, there's something here and there's patterns here?
I think I'll let you go first, because I'm intrigued to know what you want to say. Like, because I've not thought about it maybe perhaps in the way that you've mentioned before.
Yeah, I think that the selection to have Zubimendi versus Rice deep and alternate who is the one that is going to be the shuttler and the diamond that we use, and the use of that it is where we try to change impetus, right? And so I think, when you have a look at what Calafiori has been able to offer, by the way, he becomes a lot more of a running option in the second half than he does a carrier with the ball.
Yeah.
And it was him creating space with his runs, whereas before, I think Calafiori's maverick nature, actually we associate with him carrying through the middle third, don't we? Whether it's through Italy or whatnot, and even with Arsenal, a lot of his maverickness comes through his own in-possession work. How many shots has he had for Arsenal? But I actually think it was quite different when you put Declan Rice as the anchor in that aspect. You shift who is going to be the carrier in possession. Zubimendi becomes that higher in the pocket. Calafiori, in just by simple nature of needing a passer and a carrier either side of your pivot anchor, he ends up becoming the runner. And so I've noticed this, that when we've gone back, there's more of a willingness for Declan Rice to anchor the midfield, Zubimendi to push high, and our left back, which is Calafiori, by the way, for most of this, he's ended up making more of a running game as opposed to being the one carrying through the pitch and then laying it off for Saka to basically run onto, which is what our normal pattern of play is. Like, we dominate in possession with the right, but Calafiori can bring the ball out with the left. And I think that our left wing becomes a bit more isolated in normal pitch dynamics. But when we are chasing a game, Calafiori becomes a runner. Declan Rice becomes the anchor, and we push Zubimendi higher, not to receive, because we need more help higher up the pitch. We need more combination play with Eze.
Better balance as well, really, isn't there, as well, with that, just in general?
It is. And it's a bit more of balance, though, in the final third of basically giving Eze a partner, because I don't think he's been as dominant on the ball in general play as we may have seen. And adding a partner for him to combine with is really important, whether that's Gyökeres, whether that's a reference setter forward, whether that's somebody like Zubimendi adding another person to receive high, or even just pushing Saka inside. I've noticed Arsenal be willing to have the runs come from the left and add a partner for Eze to combine with on the right, be a kind of move, and have Declan Rice anchor the midfield when we're in those losing game states or when we're in that physical midfield block. I've noticed that become more of a nuanced pattern. And it's been less about major changes, but just forcing the idea that our runners can run off the left, but our pattern play can increase off the right. And I think some of that comes from not having Odegaard, if I'm being really fair, because we've only been able to see these types of games in like 2 or 3 games because we've been winning most of them. So it's a small sample size, but I'm seeing it again and again. And I'm like, okay, first
It's
time.
encouraging, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, first time, shame on me kind of thing. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm doing a pattern. I'm like, okay, is this going to happen again? And I bet my bottom dollar it will.
Yeah. I mean, like, just to kind of close this segment before we get into, just general, when we reflect on this season so far, I do think, a key player for that as well has been Trossard and his performances this season. I think he's been fantastic this season. I think his performances have been really good. I thought when I'm looking at our best players in that second half, I'm looking at Trossard, I'm looking at Zubimendi, and I'm looking at Declan Rice as well, in terms of his response. Because, there's a question on it in terms of, like, the goals that we conceded were on Arsenal goals. And ironically, from two players who were so dominant in the box. I know, yes, Big Gabby had that Walter incident as well, but these are isolated scenarios. I mean, these are the best and elite box defenders out there. Which kind of, like, to close this game, I think you've summed it up brilliantly. Without all the analysis, I know we've gone quite heavy on the analysis today, but hopefully you guys enjoyed that, because I think there's a lot of interesting things to say there. But ultimately, it's a 2-2 draw in which, I think Sunderland fans will feel like their endeavours and their effort and the work rate and the desire and the way they disrupted us in the first half earned them the point. My argument is that we created more than enough to win this game of football. And ultimately, it's football. It literally is football. Like, it's variance in full flow for me. Like, it's one of those. I mean, I've watched that goal back.
David De Gea at the Emirates. Why? It's those type of moments.
Literally, for me, right? We've conceded 2 goals, and our clean sheet record, and the run that we've been on, which I do want to talk about, has been broken by 2 uncharacteristic goals that are conceded under Mikel Arteta's stewardship. If it happens once, it's a shock. If it happens twice, I'm putting that in the anomaly bucket. Genuinely, like and for me, like, it. When I look at the season so far, and I do want to talk about this before we get into questions. I sit back and reflect. Right, against Manchester United at Old Trafford, I felt personally we scammed a win there. I did. I felt we scammed a win, and you do need to do that to become a title-winning team. You're not going to be at your best every single day, every single game. They're human beings, I think sometimes there's an entitlement from fans in general, in which, we didn't play very well in this game, expected more. Like, that's fair criticism, but you also have to acknowledge that, it's not easy to do that every single game, especially Old Trafford on game week 1. Then, Man City at home, the goal we score is one of the last kicks of the game, and it's fantastic play from Eze. It's a fantastic finish from Martinelli, So Man City in that game context could feel like how we're feeling right now, when we just look at it from a pure outcome perspective. Yeah. Newcastle, we thoroughly deserved to win that game, but the manner of the goals and the way they happened, the Big Gabby goal comes right near towards the end, okay? So, Liverpool game, that for me is another example of variance working against us, But we've had moments this season which it's gone for us. We've had moments in which it's not gone for us. And that's football. It happens. And, what we know is over the course of a season, it will even out and the best team will win the league. So I think the reason why I've gone on that long, rant is the fact that I look at our run that we've had so far since Newcastle away. And just quickly going through the results. Actually, Port Vale, look at Port Vale. We beat Port Vale. And this is our response post-Man City when, I know, we were doing the pods back then, and we've been doing
there were
pods
creative concerns.
There was creative concerns. There was a lot of frustration. And we beat Port Vale. We beat Newcastle, Olympiacos, West Ham, Fulham, Atletico Madrid, Crystal Palace, Brighton, Burnley, Slavia Prague. And our most recent hiccup is Sunderland. But look at the number of games that we've gone through here with the context of injuries as well across our front line and other key areas of the pitch as well. I think, I understand. I think for me, the manner of Manchester City's win, the fact that it could have been so much better come, the time we've been doing this main podcast right now, we're looking at a much bigger lead. But that's the Premier League. These things happen. It's the Premier League. It's the biggest humbler at times in a way that you just feel it's not deserved, but it happens. And now it's about the response. But yeah, have you got any thoughts in terms of the run that we've been on and just the general, what's your message to the Arsenal fan base, George?
Arsenal have got through the physical mid-block and have done it with more consistency than any team in the league. I think variance will go against us. I think that there will be times in which we don't get points that we deserve. And for me, I'm happy that happened at the Stadium of Light, who I think will take off points against major teams. And so it's not against a team where I felt like we should have picked up points. And it's not against a game state, by the way, that I would think, no, we really can't do a Fulham or a West Ham of last season or a Southampton of the 2 years before. Like, those are games in which you walk in and you say, not only do I expect, I need the 3 points. And, you know, it can happen. I really just go to the point of it's football. And the things that I saw in the second half far outweigh the fears that I have about box defending. If I had a fear and I had to really categorize it with Arsenal, and I would say creativity through the middle third versus box defending, I think nearly 9 or 10 out of 10 Arsenal fans would sit there and tell you creating through the middle third. So to show that solution is what I augment more than I do
love that word.
Box defending.
Love that word. And to kind of continue with lovely words, because you had the word of the day, but I did have a word, and I'm gonna put it right now. The word is mendacious.
Oh,
do you know that word?
Say it
George?
again.
Mendacious.
There we go.
You know what it is, don't you? and in a sentence, the narrative of the wheels are about to fall off now. The Arsenal wheels are going to fall off. Mikel Arteta is a fraud. Or mendacious claims. So yeah. And that kind of takes me to questions. Your questions. And like we always say, if you want priority access to questions, you can do so by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. And, you know, we've got a lot of content coming up. Main podcasts, ad-free, obviously. All our podcasts are ad-free, but we've got Scouted, George's Tactics Corner, which you can access if you become a director. Scouted, TCP Live.
Your rewatches.
Rewatches, yeah. Just so much content. So much. Just get yourself involved. And also, in the background, I'm going to be looking to try and do a couple of videos on the Miguel Molina lecture that he has done back in 2021, which I referenced a lot, which he talks about our game model, he talks about principles and the way of playing, and I think it'll be really interesting, and that's something that I'm hoping to try and do during this international break. So if you want to be able to access that content, then yeah, just become a Patreon YouTube member, and you can do so by accessing the free 7-day trial within the link below. So on the Discord, some questions, and I kind of, I said we've kind of closed off the Sunderland segment, but we haven't really, because I think there's some interesting discussion about, what transpired towards the end of the game. And Ivan Smith, and there's another question as well, which kind of leans into the same sort of thing, in which he asks how we've conceded the 2 Sunderland goals, especially with Big Gabby and how he handled Broby. Is it Broby? Broby?
Mm-hmm, Broby.
Yeah. For the second. Are we worried about this, especially with the Waldemar goal as well? Should we be concerned about that element of his game, or is that a nothing issue? And to continue this discussion, there is another question in the Discord about the general approach that Mikel takes in terms of, a fifth defender in difficult game states. Is that a problem? Is that something that's leading to our backline becoming more stressed? Is it sustainable? So yeah, a lot to get your teeth stuck into there, George, but your thoughts on like the box defending Big Gabby, is there concerns there?
I'm going to leave the spacing and matching up to you, because you've described it brilliantly in other places, and I think you have thoughts there. Yeah. The one thing that I want to highlight is when you're sacrificing a game state, okay? There's 2 options as a coach that you can do. You can stop the cross from coming in, or make the bet to stop the destination. Those are 2 things that you can do. And that's beyond matching up with people, right? Like, it's just an intent access point. And the one thing that I did really want to highlight as well is, I did talk about this on my Twitter, is there is a hesitation from a coaching perspective to even introduce anybody as a variable in these types of games, because you can disrupt your team's tempo. And what I mean by that is, you have a certain intensity when you're protecting a lead than you do chasing a game. There is just a tempo involved in that. And when you're coming cold off the bench, it doesn't matter how much you're prepped and you're mentally ready to go do. The intensity of your play needs to match the intensity of the team environment, much like a clutch does with a gas pedal. And anyone that's driven manual knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't rev your clutch to the same speed as your gearbox when you're trying to press the gas, you're going to have this little ka-chunk, and then your edge installs, okay? That happens with teams. If your substitute doesn't carry the same intensity that the game environment does, not the match intensity. I don't mean run harder. I mean the tempo of what you're trying to do, whether that's slow the game down, whether that's speed the game up. If you don't match the tempo of your team, you're going to chunk your team's tempo, stall it, and it could have the opposite effect, even if the profile of your substitute is much better for the game. And this is something that a lot of coaches will debate with. Do I change the flow? Can they work it out on their own? And this is a push and pull from a substitution perspective. And the only thing that I'll add is I do think at times, Mikel can do 10 out of 10 times, he chooses the box defending route. And when you look at our personnel, it makes sense. Do I think it should be 8 out of 10 as opposed to 10 out of 10? Yes, I do. I think there are times that we can use our fullbacks and our fullback pairs, which I don't think we've still, through fitness, of course, we haven't used that switch as much as we could with other areas. It's the strongest part of our team. So as far as stressing the opposition and changing the tempo goes, you can do that. Not many teams in the league have our fullback depth, right? The Pierre Hincapié and White duo is very different to the Calafiori and the Urian Timber. And that's even more different to Miles Lewis-Skelly, who's another addition. And I just think we can change our tempo and stop the crosses from coming in. Maybe, shift that thing from 10 out of 10 from adding defenders at the back to box defend to an 8 out of 10, in which we still do it a majority of the time because we have the personnel for it. But we do switch to stop the cross at times. And the only reason I highlighted it with Sunderland in particular was I felt we blocked the middle brilliantly all match. And that actually wasn't a stress point. It was always going to be the delivery from wide, whether it was through long throw-ins. Sunderland progressed through wide into the box. That's it. They don't have the ability to play through the middle because for all of Xhaka's brilliance and Sadiqi's brilliance, they don't have that in possession quality to really penetrate you centrally. I mean, City would. But I think in theory, Sunderland wouldn't necessarily. They would enter from wide to come in. It would always be an out to in cross, always. So there was opportunity there to stress that out. But yeah, I don't want to take too much from you yourself because I think you had a brilliant point about matching up in general. But the only thing is you got to decide, do you want to stop the cross? Do you want to stop the destination? And I think just 10 out of 10 times we do the destination. And that's the only critique I could have.
I think that's, that's part of what Mikel believes in as well. To combat that game state. Now, I do say Miguel Molina's name every single time, usually on podcasts. But in that lecture, and this was back in 2021, one of the big things that's highlighted in red is comfortable defending deep. Being comfortable defending deep. Arsenal comfortable defending deep. Do I like watching that? To close games off? Absolutely not, because as much as I believe in this team, it causes me some panic, right? But that's something that they certainly do feel allows them to combat those very difficult game states, especially away from home. Now, in the context of the Sunderland game, so I really disagree with some of the discourse on Mikel and the criticism that he's had here. I agree with you, George, in terms of if there was a change you could make, I think at fullback, that's a really fair argument. A Hincapié, Calafiori switch, I think would have made sense. Now I think,
but it didn't cost us the goal.
This is my whole point on this. That's a great sub. Makes sense. I was pushing for that sub because Calafiori, every time we've been at the Northeast now against Sunderland and Newcastle, in the second half, he's been giving away these fouls which have been very irritating. So, immediately there, I didn't think it was his best. I thought his role and what he's doing in the spaces was really good, but I didn't think his actual performance on the ball,
defensively,
without the ball, I didn't think it was one of his best. So that's a really good change to make, and I felt that made sense. Would that change the outcome of this game? I don't think so. Now, there's the other argument in which, so I don't know if you remember this, George, but in the game, right, there was a situation in which Sunderland win the ball in the middle of the park, and they hit a big switch, and it's Reynaldo, and I probably butchered his name, the wing back, who is overloading Timber with the winger. And Saka's higher, he's on the centre-back, which means that the fast switch is open, and a better touch, and we're in the spot above it there. It's a really good pass, ball over the top. Mikel responds by bringing in Mosquera on to create that line of 5, which means that the switch is not going to be as effective because we've got more cover there. I think that sub made sense to me because it's also another player in the box who can help you in that physical battle. I really like that sub. Now, for me, Mikel Merino didn't have his best game, but Mikel Merino, in theory, is one of the only players we have available there who has the capacity to hold the ball up. And in that game state, it's very important, especially with the fact that we didn't have any forwards who could stretch the pitch with the pace that would have needed to help us and alleviate pressure there. No Madueke, no Martinelli, no Kai Havertz, no Gyökeres. These are players who would have certainly helped. At Old Trafford, in that final 10 or so minutes at Manchester United, I thought we handled it really well. We brought on Madueke. We also brought on Miles Lewis-Skelly at the back as well, which is a good change, which, like we were kind of arguing, the fullback changes, you can make that change. That's certainly something you shouldn't be...
opposed to.
Or something opposed to. I think maybe there's the argument of, you're adding, extra time by making that sub, which I get, but I think fresh legs there would have certainly helped. Ultimately, I think it's just football. Genuinely, I just think it is football that has allowed this outcome to occur. And in terms of whether it's sustainable to go to a back five, I think that's one of the key things that people are asking. I do think it's sustainable because our track record in doing so is fantastic. We could have, let's say, our entire catalogue of games in which Mikel's gone to a back five is changed, in which we don't go to a back five and we go a little bit more attacking and we bring on attacking players. In the same way, we're gonna drop points. We're gonna drop points by doing that as well. So my overarching feeling is I don't believe it's necessarily the wrong decision to make. Do I like that decision? No, because I'm a little bit more stressed. But it's a tried and tested method that we use, and I think ultimately we would have seen us benefited more from it had we have had forwards who could have added a bit more energy across our front line. Because there's no way Saka would have stayed on the pitch, after that, because he looked tired. He looked gassed out. Mikel Merino, he looked gassed out. Trossard, he looked gassed out. But I don't think bringing on a Miles for a Trossard or bringing on a Miles for a Merino, which I think, or Norgard on, would have changed the game, personally. That's the way I stand. I'm not saying that people are wrong in saying if Norgard was on, we wouldn't have conceded a goal. I can't prove that to you, but my feeling is I don't believe that it's that important.
I push back on the Norgard thing because you want a tall body and somebody going out to him. The destination was the box. It's going over the top of Norgard's head. Okay, maybe you can argue the second ball from the first contention, but really the issue was Brobbey in that first contact. that was the issue. It wasn't the second ball game that we were losing in front of it. We actually dominated the first ball and we just threw it up top and we didn't have any reference to relieve the pressure. So it just came back at us. But it would have been a pinball match. It would have gone over the top of Norgard every time. So I don't think adding someone in the midfield made sense. Look, I'm with you on the Miles and even Hincapié in general, because why? I just felt like having another runner there as an option. I'm always about creativity too. I have always been thinking for a while, much in the same way that we use Kieran Tierney, can we use Ben White's legs to push a team back? Not necessarily to defend, but just have him chase a ball with his dynamism in his legs, because the theory of Martinelli on the right is just having a strong runner over large distances. Can we use Ben's legs like that in the last 10 minutes? Maybe. Is that the first time that I want to see it? Probably not. So there's things that I can maybe suggest, but broadly speaking, I'm like you. I think this was football variance. I didn't see anything that was drastically at fault. And by the way, Raya's proactivity off his line saved 2 potential goals previously. So I think the commentary about him coming out, why is he coming out? Well, he came out and he saved you 2 goals previously in those previous 10 minutes.
This is what I'm saying.
You can pick and choose the moments in which your players do these things as wrong, but you only do it because the outcome was bad in the moment. Exactly. Whereas the exact same skills and things they're doing is what has saved you goals in other instances in the match. So it's one of those. And I think you're frustrated and pissed off because I'll tell you why, Rohan. Everybody knew that the City and Liverpool match was coming up and they just wanted the proverbial, was it 9 or 10 points that we could have been ahead?
It would have been 10 on Liverpool and 9 on City.
There you go. So that was what people wanted. And that's about it. So that's all I've got towards that.
I think, just to quickly end on the Raya, and we'll have one more question before we close off. David Raya won us that game at Manchester United with his saves. Let's not forget these things. Now, obviously, in the moment, I'll tell you, I was cussing Royal, I was cussing Gabriel, I was fuming. But then when you sit back, you realise, you look at the season, you look at key moments. David Raya has been fantastic for us. Gabriel has been fantastic this season. Their consistency has been phenomenal over the course of multiple, triple seasons now. Not even multiple, it's triple seasons. Yeah. In Gabriel's context, it's even more than that. So it happens. Literally, it happens. Alisson, one of the best goalkeepers I've seen in the Premier League era, has had many blunders over the years that have cost Liverpool points. But over the entirety of his career, he's won them a bucket load of points. And the same
Does
way...
Virgil van Dijk's box defending in that match mean he's not a great?
Exactly, yeah. It's one of those ones, isn't it? Yeah, and I hear maybe there's a bit of apprehension around it because you've seen 2 instances this season, but I genuinely don't think we should be worried about that at all. To close this off, from the Mitko on the Discord, can you name a player from each of the teams we have faced this season so far in which you've been impressed with the most? And could you see any of them as a potential option for the Arsenal in the future? A nice question to end it. James.
I'm assuming one, though, yeah? Not like each team you faced, pick one.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say. And not because it's recency bias. Genuinely, I thought Siddiqui is a very good player. Very good squad depth. Yeah. Tidy. I think he's got a brilliant engine against him. I think that is a really good, smart pickup for a team looking to raise their floor. If you're looking at maybe a younger option to kind of give you legs, I think that's a really, really good pickup. Kind of an all-rounder. And I actually think there's a lot of potential in possession as well, because I think he made some really smart passes. But genuinely, that kid has 3 lungs. And I joke, but Tesco Conte... It's really good to see somebody who has legs and intensity when the Premier League is moving towards that. Yeah. And so, I think he could be a really good pickup.
Nah, looks good. That Granit Xhaka looks all right as well, doesn't it? Maybe not in terms of potential for us, because I think, we've got options here, but I've been on the Elliot Anderson bandwagon this season. I've been watching him, and I've been thinking, oh my God, this is an all-rounder. This is actually such a baller. I didn't see it before. I didn't watch loads of... Yeah. When you, we've watched Forest, right? But you don't watch individual players, like with a keen eye. I've been watching Elliot Anderson. I went to the game against Forest, and I thought Ethan Waneri did brilliantly against him, but equally I thought Anderson, he looks serious. So, yeah.
Is he in your starting English 11? For the World Cup?
Undecided.
Fair.
Not sure. Yeah, you?
He's approaching. It depends on the balance of who you want the third to be, but if you're talking to me about a Declan Rice, Elliot Anderson, and an Eze midfield, I'm thinking, ooh.
What about Judy, George?
Sorry, Jude Bellingham. I forgot, but even then,
of talent.
But even then, it kind of, he is a budget Valverde, Elliot Anderson.
Yeah,
so, I like him.
Definitely keep an eye on him for sure. Close it there. Thank you so much, George, for always being excellent. We've gone quite heavy on the analysis. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, because I felt there were some important things to say. It's been a really optimistic pod, because I feel it's rightfully optimistic, because I think we shouldn't let that outcome dictate how we feel. It's just a bit annoying because we have to sit on this result now for the next 2 weeks. But equally, we're looking at that next set of games against... there was another question about the bull and bear case of Arsenal in the next set of games. But we've got Chelsea, Bayern Munich, and Spurs first. Madueke, Havertz, Gyökeres, Martinelli all could be back. So I think I'm confident that we can go on another run. But no, thank you so much, George, for always tuning in and being the staple, the main one of the kind of podcast.
Thank you, good sir.
And hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. If you've enjoyed it, please do like, share, and subscribe. But there's nothing else for me to say other than thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.